Adrienne with Vintage in Bloom, and we are going to be doing just a Annie Sloan 101 how to get started on a piece of furniture. So the very first thing that you are going to do when painting any piece of furniture that has an existing finish on it is you're going to need to clean it really well. This would include any natural woods that have a lacquer or a varnish finish on them. So a natural wood would be the only thing that you don't cleanse with a degreaser. So raw wood, porous surfaces like rock or cement, metals you wouldn't clean with a degreaser unless it was greasy. So you would use, we recommend Cred Cutter. It's a favorite of ours. I will just spray it directly on the piece, wipe it down with a cloth, and then I follow up by wiping down with clean water just to make sure I've gotten all the soap off of here. So this piece is particularly, or it was once upon a time, particularly shiny. It has somewhat of a laminate, laminate veneer on the top. However, this piece truly is vintage. It is an antique, and so all of this finish is really matte and dull, so I'm not too concerned that the paint is going to stick. So I am not going to prepare this by sanding any of it. I do have some paint chipping off. That's okay. The chalk paint is going to go ahead and kind of seal all of that in. I paint with a heavy hand, so I will most likely not be able to see most of this damage because you'll see brush strokes. So what tools am I going to use? We are going to be using Old White. So I'm using Annie Sloan's Old White. When you are opening Annie Sloan's global cans, you do need to use a paint key. This is important. It keeps you from destroying your lids so that you can reuse them. You're going to want to use a clean stir stick every time that you mix your paint. You're going to want to make sure that you're scraping at the bottom of your can the entire time that you're mixing, and then you'll scrape down your walls and then just continue to do a mix. One really important thing about Annie Sloan's chalk paint is that it does dry to a brittle and chunky finish in piles if left in an area to dry. So you really want to paint out of a separate container. I'm going to recycle this sour cream container, and I am going to pour my paint just right into here so that I don't have to worry about chunks and debris and having any dry paint spread across my piece of furniture. So because this is a small side table, I am going to use a small Annie Sloan round brush. It is the perfect size for the texture that I want to leave on this piece. If I were to use a medium, I think that it might look a little heavy-handed with how I want to apply the paint, because I'm going to do a slap dash method and then just straighten across kind of the trim lines. There's my dog, there's my kids. Okay, so here comes my family. So here we are, everybody's home. All right, so getting started, you're gonna wanna take off any existing hardware. Penny, honey, sweetie, thank you. All right, my screwdriver is right up here. This one just has a Phillips head in it, so I'm gonna take the drawer out and take these out. I left the drawer in when I cleaned. I just sprayed the whole piece down, and Cred Cutter will really amaze you with how disgusting your furniture is when you didn't know it, especially when you do your kitchen cabinets. That is a life-changing experience, cleaning them with Crud Cutter before you paint them. It'll make you have all sorts of feelings. So, all right, so I'm just gonna set my hardware to the side. I think we're going to silver leaf them. I don't know. Penny has plans, so we shall see what she has planned for us. So now that the drawer face is off of there, I am going to leave this drawer out because I do want to paint this gold detail on top. Oftentimes when I paint furniture, I leave the drawers in place, tucked in, and I just paint across the surface as if it were a flat surface. But for the purposes of the rainbow that we are going to do on this drawer front, I'm just going to set this aside and I will paint it. So getting started, I am going to paint using what is known commonly as a slapdash method. When you go into your paint, you don't want this globby slopping it on there, or you're making drips. This is a very thick paint. It goes a very long way. So you are going to want to take off some of that paint, and you're just going to get started making sweeping motions with your whole arm. The nice part about Annie's paint is it is so thick that it leaves brush strokes and texture in the paint that really make your piece look interesting. It's important when you're painting that you kind of stay in one general area at a time. You don't want to start doing the top of a piece and then think, oh, okay, I'm gonna move down here. You want your paint to dry cohesively. So you want to constantly be blending that next layer that comes in. The cool thing about Annie's paint is you can work it for a long time before it starts to get tortured. And by tortured, I mean it's dry, but you're still trying to drag it and work it. So this is what's known as her slapdash method. It's slapping and dashing across the board. You're creating these little X's, and as you do that, you can move this paint for a very long time, and it goes a very long way. So I wish I was painting a more drastic color on this so that it were a little bit easier for you guys to see the coverage, but I think once I go to the front, it'll be better. So I'm going to get this first coat on here. I see all of my brush strokes in the light. So I'm using the glare from the light to kind of see where I've been and how everything kind of looks, if it looks even or not. If I did not want for this to have a textured look, I would use either a roller or a flat brush, and I would want to be pulling the paint in the same directions. And you would want those directions to follow the lines of your furniture. I do not paint like that personally for my home, so slapdash it is. All right, so I have my first coat of paint on the top of this. And I am painting, yeah, we're painting with Old White. So next I'm going to turn so that hopefully you guys can see. When you go in to do an area that has an inset, you want to get your paint in that area first. You want to get all of your outline done and then work on filling that in. And it's so that you can make sure, because when you're dragging your paintbrush along these lines that have corners and kind of grooves that you have to get into, you're pulling paint in other areas, so it kind of like you could leave a weird line. You don't want to do that. So you fill in those areas first so that you can go over the flat surface with your round brush and then incorporate the rest of your paint. Gives it a much more even look, and it makes it look more incorporated. And then you also know that you've gotten in all of the grooves. So you're just gonna make sure that you pull paint, that you get it over all your surfaces. If you see any mistakes, you see anything weird, go ahead and go right to it, because this paint is workable. It dries very quickly, but it's workable for a lot longer than expected. When you have something like a latex paint or something that has a plastic finish in it, you mess with the top coat when you continue to go back and touch the paint. With Annie's chalk paint, you're just dealing with the paint. So as you go back and touch it, you're not changing the finish of it, because your finish will come later when we apply the wax. Kind of nice. It allows you a lot of leeway and a lot of forgiveness. Like, you can just continue and go back over that area even though it's just been painted. So I still have this area in the drawer. We've got this leg. And I'm just gonna try and keep everything as uniform as I can. So here's the leg. You're gonna wanna use a drop cloth when you're painting, especially if you're gonna be distressing your piece, because you're gonna want something to capture the dust. But more importantly, you wanna be able to paint all the way down the legs. So a drop cloth is perfect for that. You may also wanna block your piece up. I don't mind painting directly onto my drop cloth, so I didn't block my piece up. So, I'm going to turn it back this way. This is such a nice, light little piece. Turn the face towards you guys. I'm going to answer all questions at the end. So I'm going to add this on here. So for lines like this, I often get questions about, do you do slapdash on legs when you're doing it everywhere else? It's totally up to you. There's no right or wrong answer. If you like, I'm so sorry if you guys can hear my daughter crying. If you like a lot of texture on the whole piece, by all means go ahead and do that. If you're going to be using a dark wax over this, or any like a wash special effects, and you really want to add texture, go for it. So since this is for my daughter, and I know my daughter is funky like me, I'm just going to go ahead and add texture through the whole thing. Now there's a lot of areas where the paint was chipping off. As you can see, one coat of old white is completely covering the mess that this finish was to begin with. So I think I'm going to be able to get away with doing 2 coats of old white on this piece. And then I will tape off the drawer, and I will do the rainbow stripes that my daughter wants on all of her furniture. So we bought very inexpensive French provincial furniture for my 5-year-old daughter off of the marketplace and Craigslist over the last year, and she now has a full suite. So we are going to be painting it all old white and doing rainbow drawers. So that is the beginning of this process for this side table. Now, when painting in a cavernous area like a cupboard, you want to start with your back wall. And the back wall, you're going to want to start at the back top of your wall, for the simple reason of you don't want to be leaning into wet paint. So you're going to load up your brush, and you're just going to stick as much paint in every corner and crease that you can to make your outline, and then you're going to color in your outline. And the nice part about painting the very back of something that sits as low as this end table is not many people are going to be looking at it. So I am just going to worry about coverage, and I'm going to worry less about my brush strokes for that first coat. So now that I have the back of that done, my next step is going to be to do the sides. So again, I'm going to go up at the top and get all of these creases along the bottom and the sides. And you're just, I mean, it's not a delicate process, especially since we go back and we kind of refine our brush strokes after putting them in there. All right, so I have my outline in there now, so now I'll fill it in. All right. Almost done. This is not bad at all. So I'll show you guys, bring you guys a little bit closer so that you can see in the bottom a little more clearly. So there's definitely damage. Let me just see if any of these will come off. But I'm just gonna paint right over it. Again, I'm just looking for coverage because I know this cubby is gonna be filled with a basket that has her socks or has some other kind of toy in it. The yelling, it's the witching hour. The yelling has begun. All right. So again, it's not this painstaking, delicate process. It is a spreading of the paint, and it ends up being beautiful. So what do you do after this first coat of paint? The top of this piece would be just about ready to do a second coat by the time that I finish. So you could very well do your next coat after your first coat. So you would do your second coat, and then you would decide whether you wanted to distress or what other directions you wanted to go in. And if you guys are wondering about waxes, tune in on Thursday because we'll be talking about all about waxes then. So